For a view from the opposition, I want to bring in the Shadow Minister for Education and Indigenous Australians, Julian Leeser. Welcome to the program.
Good to be with you, Patricia.
I want to actually start on One Nation, just because we ended there with Murray Watt on One Nation, so it sort of makes sense really for our viewers. One Nation's still doing really well in the polls, including the Redbridge poll, still doing very well in the Victorian poll as well, despite all of the troubles we've seen in the Labor government with the change of Premier, and they don't even have candidates for the lower house or policies. What does that say about how they view the major parties?
Well, I think there is a degree of frustration. I'm frustrated too about the direction that the Labor Party is taking our country, and I think Victorians are frustrated with the way Labor has taken their state. But I spend very little time thinking about One Nation. I spend time thinking about my responsibilities, about Indigenous affairs, how to improve the lives of Indigenous Australians, how to improve the experience of students in schools and our universities. That's my responsibility, and how to represent my own electorate.
I want to talk to you about the Garma Festival and many of the ideas that have come forward. You attended over the weekend. You said, as someone who once supported The Voice, that people had rejected constitutional recognition. Then in relation to Noel Pearson's idea of getting rid of the state departments of Aboriginal affairs and trying to have a different focus, you said people don't want structural change. But didn't they reject constitutional recognition? It was a very specific kind of structural change, not all structural change.
Well, Patricia, part of my reason for giving the speech is that the Prime Minister had chosen not to go to Garma this year, and indeed I was critical about the fact that after having raised all of these issues with relation to Indigenous disadvantage during the course of the referendum, and I argued for the same position that he argued as well, that he didn't crack on then and say, well, having raised these issues, we need to double down on trying to address the issues. And I think the policy area has been adrift. I think what we don't need at the moment is further discussions about the structures of government. We need a renewed focus on some of those areas that I think will make a huge difference intergenerationally to Indigenous people. And that's why I set out an agenda in relation to education, wealth creation and suicide prevention.
OK, so they're areas, but obviously unless you do something more seismic at a structural level, won't we continue to see poor results?
Well, I think there's nothing more seismic than you can do than get Indigenous kids to school and ensure that they complete school. And what I said in the speech was that there are a range of different people achieving good outcomes, and what we need is more autonomy and flexibility for schools. We need the support of the private sector, both through philanthropy partnering with government and through the use of non-government schools. I talked about the great growth and success story of Indigenous business, and yet some of the land tenure issues that we have needing to be addressed so more Indigenous people can take advantage of the land. And I also talked about the fact that, you can address those two things, but unless we address the national tragedy of the growing rate of Indigenous suicide, and I lost my own father to suicide, so I feel this very deeply. Unless we address those issues properly, then it won't matter what else we do. So they are the three areas that will have my laser-like focus as the Shadow Minister and hopefully one day the Minister.
Julian Leeser, the Productivity Commission has published the Closing the Gap update. You've seen it, incarceration and suicide that you've just mentioned, and the number of children in out-of-home care, they're all climbing. But it's quite clear that some of the policies at a state and territory level are making this worse. Does that worry you?
Yes, it does. One of the things that I said in my speech was also pointing out that the Closing the Gap targets are a bit wonky in a sense, that of the 19 targets, we only get new data on 8 of them every year. Some of them are only ever reported in the census, and so you go through 2 election cycles before actually getting good data. That's why we've called for an audit, and I wrote to the Auditor General, of Indigenous spending in town camps and remote communities in the wake of the tragic death of Kumanjai little baby. We need to ensure that federal spending, at least, and I hope that the colleagues at the state level are looking at this in the same way, we need to ensure that the spending is actually achieving its outcome, because that's the best way that we can get more real-time evidence as to whether we're making a difference or not. And if we're not making a difference, or things are going the wrong way, we need to adjust the policies.
Are you worried about the NT government's approach? I know they're of the same political persuasion, of course, as you, but you can be honest with friends, right? Do you think they're taking policy approaches that are making it harder for particularly Aboriginal children?
Well, look, I was interested at the weekend to be at the Gama Festival. I heard the Chief Minister speak, and she announced the landmark agreement in the handing back of effectively Nhulunbuy to the traditional owners, and her support for the traditional owners in relation to a future for some of the mining infrastructure that's gone on there in terms of fuel storage. So I think in an economic sense that they are really trying to find an economic future for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. But I've been very clear in relation to crime and issues like that in a range of areas, that law-abiding people, whoever they are, deserve the full protection of the law. I've said that repeatedly in other contexts, and I think the same is true in the Northern Territory.
I want to go to the Iran war. Early in the war, you said the Persian community wanted this kind of action. What are they telling you now as it drags on?
Well, they are still saying to me that what they want to see is the change of regime in their homeland in Iran. I represent the third largest Persian community in Australia. They have been very, very concerned about the actions of the embassy. The embassy, despite having expelled the ambassador, it retained staff here. They tell me about those staff interfering with Australian citizens here of Persian background, intimidating them, spying on them, reporting back to Iran. I think we have no place for those sorts of activities in Australia, and we should send the embassy, we should shut it down and send those people packing.
I just want to get you, if I can, finally on gambling. Do you share your colleague Simon Kennedy's view that there needs to be an opt-in model for gambling advertisements and a stronger action on inducements?
I haven't followed these issues as closely as Simon Kennedy. There's been a couple of things that have really concerned me. Number one, we want to ensure that families can sit down and watch sport together free of advertising in relation to gambling, or with it as reduced as possible. And secondly, I was shocked, as so many were, by some of the revelations. And if people have broken the law by offering and supplying illegal drugs, that needs to be reported to the proper authorities.
Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Thanks, Patricia.
Joining us there, the Shadow Education Minister, Julian Leeser, speaking to me there about a couple of different issues, the Liberal Party's Indigenous policy and gambling, of course.